in caves of western Arkansas. This is from Arkansas, 1913. This is going to lead us into quite a fascinating stretch of articles here. This is a long one, 2-pager. So appreciate you guys for sticking with me through some of the nauseating amount of reading that I do, but I appreciate it very much. Remains of Confederates powder magazine, caves of western Arkansas. Interest among the tourists to the White River County this summer is upon the caves in the hills, hundreds of which are to be found, great and small, scattered promiscuously throughout the Ozark Mountains. No, you know what I want to do here before we. I want to talk about. The age of the Ozarks. Since we're mentioning the Ozarks, I want to read something really quick that just popped into my head. Okay, let's see how this is showing up here. I think I got to Ancient Ozarks. Okay. Kind of bouncing around today, but I'm just kind of going with the flow in my head. All right, here we go. I wanted to read this before I got into the cave work, and I kind of slipped my head here, and I just clicked off of it like a big old dummy. All righty. This is 1902. The ancient Ozarks. The Himalayas are newcomers compared with them. You know what I've been saying about time and age and mountains appearing and disappearing overnight, and you know, a lot of my Atlantis and Lemuria work shows that through upheavals and the sinking and rising of continents and you know the deluge and many of these other things all seem to correlate nicely with one another. And the author here is going to postulate some pretty striking things. Men speak in wandering words of the beauty of Yara, of the grandeur of Everest, of the awe-inspiring canyons of the West, of the Andes and the Alps. But no man has ever looked upon a scene more incisive to thought and profound meditative imagination than the rugged hills of the lower Ozarks. So the Ozarks extend between Missouri and Arkansas for those who aren't aware. And the lower Ozarks, obviously, being they stretch into about the middle of Arkansas and Little Rock. Little Rock is an interesting place. It's the center of the state, and it's named Little Rock. You know, and don't get me started on the Eufaula Stone and the Atlantean overlays just there, but also the name Kansas. He who climbs the Jura stands upon a peak of the modern world, but the man who stands upon the highlands of the Ozark County looks upon land so old that the brain becomes weary. Is at tempting to measure its ages. I apologize, that's some kind of typo. Though measurement be made in epochs, not in thousands of years, the Himalayan mountains have, during some thousands or millions of years, poured their deposits into that body of water which we know as the China Sea. And by filling the basin of the sea, have deposited so much alluvium that the empire of China, with its untold population, now occupies a space over which the water once flowed unrestrained. Look to your maps and note how large the lowlands of China are. Conjecture the depth of the alluvium deposits in those lowlands and then comprehend, if you can, the ages during which the Himalayan mountains have been busy filling up the basin of the sea, and by wash of the tides and overflow of the rivers, building the land of China as we know it today. The brain wearies of the effort. We are incapable of comprehending such almost infinite time, and yet we do know that the mountains of Asia are the youngest mountain ranges on earth, and that the lowlands of China belong to the last days. We may grasp a suggestion of facts by comparison sometimes. If the Himalayas are the youngest, the Ozarks are the oldest of the mountain ranges, and between the dates which give them the birth, the Rocky Mountains, and the Appalachians, and the Apennines, and the Alps, and the Andes, and the Nevadas, The Circassians, the Caucasians, the great mountain ranges of Australia and Africa had birth, yet these were not reared suddenly by some continent creating explosion, but slowly, surely, tenderly, as it becomes Mother Earth to develop her giant children. Thus, by analysis, we arrive at the age of the Ozarks, yet fail to comprehend, for we cannot measure their ancient height, nor picture the stormy world. We can dimly imagine revolving, enveloped clouds, the rain in ceaseless torrents descending, and the wide ocean rolling free and unbroken. Save were the Ozarks, breast the waves and turn the tide back upon itself. The lover of nature finds food for these reflections when he visits the region south of Springfield, Missouri. During the recent campaign, it was my privilege for the third time to answer a party call to go into that most picturesque and, to me, delightful portion of the state. Springfield is located upon a very high tableland. Much of the country surrounding it is level as an ideal seafloor. Yet the city lies at an altitude of about 1,900 feet above sea level, and Cedar Gap, a few miles to the east of Springfield, is now the highest place in the state. There are some lead mines in the section, and thereby we know that the wash from higher levels once flowed into that one-time valley, for none of the lead there is of plutonic origin, but is all a reconcentration of other deposits. It follows from this consideration that the tableland of Greene County was once washed by the Turanian Sea on the west and by the ocean on the east, while to the north the Ozarks reared their masses very far above their previous height. Natural changes are very strange. The valley has become the highlands, and the mountains of old are now simply big hills divided by creeks and rivers, which have eaten their way deep down into the primary rocks, and the soil and the great piles of rocks which once crowned the Ozarks have been washed away and now constitute the alluvial deposits of Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, and Kansas. Cedar Gap is strangely misnamed. It is not a gap. It is a promontory. It is the only land in Missouri entitled by its elevation to be called a mountain. Yet, it is not a mountain. It is simply an arched neck of land connecting two elevated plateaus. And north and south of it, deep cut valleys make railroad buildings and transportation unproblematic. North of the railroad, water flows into the Gasconda. South of the railroad, water flows into the White River. The railroad ride at Cedar Gap and about 1 mile to the east brings into view, looking southward, a scene of wonderful beauty. Heavy rainfalls during many ages have cut the land into 10,000 fragmentary hills, and 1,000 small channels might be counted from the car windows. It is probable that the country immediately south of Cedar Gap may never be very productive of minerals, for that section represents an area not of the deposit and reconstruction, but of waste and erosion. Its mineral wealth is being carried, or has been carried, to lower levels. But if it lacks in this, it is fortunate in other regards. Its narrow valleys rise abundant crops, and its hills grow apples, peaches, grapes, pears of exquisite flavor. Vast stretches of primary forest provide cheap lumber, cheap fuel, and an almost inexhaustible grazing ground for cattle, hogs, sheep, and goats. And when, in the course of time, railroads traverse the section, we may, with reason, anticipate that the great springs and other water powers of Ozark, Stone, and Tawney counties may be utilized for extensive manufacturing. Now, this is an important thing to touch on because we're going to get into the water systems here and the cave systems and how they're correlated. And we're going to talk about Mineral Springs, Arkansas, which is just a radium hotspot, and why those things are so important to remember. Now, the washing of these hills and mountains and so forth and so on, similar to like what we talked about in the Colorado episode with the Rocky Mountains. The rivers and streams are filled with radium. Now, the tops of these hills have been coated in it. Um, Radium has even been extrapolated as the sources of all electrical phenomenon in the atmosphere. Rocks emit radium, which is just pure light, traveling at near the speed of light, slightly slower, and they ionize the air. And these effects are curative to a sense, but they also produce, like I said, large amounts of ionization of the air. And high humidity correlates even better with this, right? And the more humid regions of especially the Southwest, but other parts of the world are far more prone to lightning strikes. That's a bit off topic, but yeah, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna speed it up just so we can get through this. The ride from Cedar Gap to Mountain Grove is neither picturesque nor interesting, expecting the facts that we find the Mountain Grove, a small counterpart of the Greene County Plateau, and we note the surprise that whereas Greene County has 3 channels of drainage to the south and the west, Wright County has but 2 to the northeast and to the south. In brief, somewhere between Springfield and the Grove across the backbone of the Ozarks, and we were unconscious of the change. But as we turned southward into Douglas County, we again faced the evidence of time's titanic energy, in which little waterfalls are singing merry music to the wastes and solitudes. We watch wild birds, unscared, which lazily float in the air. We look on either side of us and see great ledges of rocks and the bluffs, straight for strata on either side at equal height. Then we know that we are living in the presence of the ages. Time has plainly written its lessons there, that we may learn. We pass from ragged Douglas into more ragged Ozark County. There is a range of hills in the western part of the Ozark County, which probably marks the highest original plain in the old mountains in that section. These hills rise to an elevation of about 900 feet above the lowest lands in that district. They are almost bare of vegetation and are rapidly wearing away. It is reported to me upon good authority that seashells have been found upon these hills. I believe the statement to be true, although I did not myself climb to the highest points, for it is well known that the sea once covered the entire belt. Even when the mountain ranges to the north were far above the water, the physical feature of the country indicate that a range of high submerged land at this point formerly connected the Ozarks of Arkansas and Missouri. The land in Taney County was largely formed as an alluvial deposit. This fact is established by the character of the soil upon the high level lands in the neighborhood of Brown Branch and Bradenville, and is further supported by the deposit of considerable quantities of iron ore and jack in the lower sections of the county. The zinc deposits there are not rich in percentage, but are in large. And I'm just gonna pause there on large bodies before closing the brief article. The larger Ozarks let me describe a scene in the western part of the Taney County of such character, scope, and beauty as to command the rapt attention of any lover of nature who may be fortunate enough to see it. At a distance of some 5 miles northwest to Forsyth, the winding road climbs by easy approaches far up the southern slope of the mountain. We pause below us in the abyss. Above us, the mountain rises 200 feet. Many miles of the southwestern Bozeman Mountains is dimly seen upon the horizon. We look southward into Arkansas to point where the hill joins hill and other hillside valleys. We think it all one level plain, yet between us and these points which limit our vision, we look across a sea of hills. And we know that the deep valleys are there. We trace out their dimly defined valley of White River. On and on and on and on. The basin into which the Ozark poured their lavish treasures before White River ate its way through the divide and drained the valley and the Gulf. So it was a bit romantic and a bit long winded, so I apologize for that. But again, the caption is by far the most important part. The ancient Ozarks, the Himalayans are newcomers compared to them. Um, that may seem like a stretch, but now we're going to get into some of the cave systems and explore that concept a little bit further. And we will talk about a 300-mile cave system found inside the Ozark Mountains. Arabian Night Wonders, a cave in the Ozark Mountains surpasses in extent that of Kentucky. Now, these systems, as I've stated before, I believe are all interconnected. And when we get to Missouri, we're going to connect those dots a little bit further. as we show that the subterranean parts of this realm have been vastly buried and lie far, far below the ground. And that, like I've stated so many times, that these mound systems are really just huge buildings, parts of big cities. And the best evidence for that we'll find in Missouri. So, yeah, again, everybody, I appreciate you for sticking with me through some of these long winded ones. I know they can be a bit torturous. And thank you for all 117 of you here today. Again, this is 1913 Caves of Western Arkansas. Interest seen among the tourists to the White River County this summer is upon the caves in the hills, hundreds of which are to be found, great and small, scattered promiscuously through the Ozark Mountains. Excuse me. There is an uncanny fascination in wandering about with Mother Nature and viewing the works. I just realized I didn't even. You're just staring at me reading. That's not fun. So yeah, lots of good stuff lined up for this month. Yeah, lots of great collabs. Gonna be trying to do more of those. I've kind of shied away from the collaborations just because my schedule is a nightmare when it comes to trying to figure those things out. And over the time of 4 months or so of having this channel, 5 months, whatever it is, I've had to cancel on people, and that's a pretty shitty feeling. So family is the priority, and but finding the correct time and way to do things. And so yeah, I'm working on some pretty awesome collaboration stuff that I plan on coming out with this month. um yeah, stay tuned again for the 10,000 subscriber live stream. I gave you a little teaser uh clip of the article I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff, but kind of all things hidden tech. um Yeah, the hidden realms of America predominantly, but the whole realm. Um, the Radium series, I've already got 3 episodes lined up for that, um, which I love. I think it's one of my favorite series. I've got kind of a wrap up episode. It'll probably be the last one for the Etruscans. Make some drive some really important points home with their language and the correlations between the mythos of the Etruscans and the Finnish Kalevala. And yeah, a lot of the Finnish Kalevala undertones exist strongly here in America as well. So yeah, August is going to be a fun month. So it's going to be a busy month. So stay tuned to lots of new material. There is an uncanny fascination in wandering about with Mother Nature and viewing the works which she has wrought underground. There are many kinds of these caves that have been explored more or less. Bat caves, where the strange little creatures, half bird, half animal, are to be seen by the thousands. Marble caves with vast corridors and chambers, where drip by drip the water falls from the roof, heavily charged with lime, creating after a long period huge stalactites and stalagmites, which sometimes meet and form solid pillars of marble of various hues. Caves in which large deposits of zinc ore are found, being literally storehouses of zinc carbonates and silicates. The marble cave located near Garber on the north end of the White River Railroad is the most attractive, partly because it is in direct line with tourist travel, and partly because it is the second in size in America and far the most interesting from a geological standpoint, on account of the many curious water formations of rock found in its subterranean passages. The opening to the cave is on top of a hill, and the entrance is made down a ladder some 60 feet long. One passing along and seeing the hole would not suspect the depth to which it leads. After descending the ladder, the main corridor leads off, sometimes narrow and low, and sometimes high and wide. In many places, Great chambers open up that would accommodate a company of cavalry. These chambers are full of curious stalactites and stalagmites of pure marble, and these the cave takes its name. These formations in one chamber, which is designated as the throne room, are of gigantic size and at one end have formed at a graceful angle, several meeting, forming a huge marble throne chair. A small river runs through the cave, and as in Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, the fish are blind. In the cave, the scientists found this spring a number of white salamanders, a reptile that resembles a lizard 7 inches long. These were blind and were the first of their kind over to be discovered. Probably meant to write ever, no, lots of spelling errors in these. This is an interesting cave directly across the river from Cotter that has the same kind of an entrance as the Marble Cave, and which also carries an underground stream. It is so not so large and does not have the strange and curious formations of the former, but it is one of the points of interest. There are two blowing caves in the Arkansas Ozarks, one in Batesville and one in Searcy County near Big Flat. All summer long, a cold blast blows from their mouth. In the winter, they suck instead of blow, owing probably to the difference in the atmospheric conditions. So this is really interesting feature you find with a lot of caves, not a lot, but with caves all over America that for 6 months of the year they blow out air and for 6 months they suck in air. Um, the breathing of the earth and the subterranean realms is really interesting. Um, they find tides in some of these cavern systems. Um, and the magnetism and atmospheric pressure correlations are really interesting. Do they have direct relation to the outer air? I don't know, but it's definitely incredible that there is a kind of calculated um, ebb and flow to the air in these caves and their temperature. It's very interesting. As above, so below. The subterranean world is connected with the world above ground as well. White River has been exploited as a health resort. It is claimed that the air that comes from this cave will cure hay fever. Before we end here, we're going to get into some of the hot springs. Hot Springs, Arkansas. Quite an incredible place in the 1800s. One of the most frequented um, of quote vacation destinations was Hot Springs, Arkansas. And we've talked a lot on this channel about um, hot springs, aroma baths, um, you know, the sauna, right? That exists in so many cultures. It's pretty hard. It's undeniable at this point. And that a lot of these saunas existed in rock formations, and radium emanations played a huge part in this. And the curative properties would later be attributed to radium, and that the steam was permeated with radium. And again, as I've stated, the medium in which the human is exposed to radium is incredibly important. Water, steam being the most effective manner. At one time, not many years ago, a company was formed to build a hotel over this cave and to use the air that came from its mouth as the sole ventilation for the building. Now, we're going to show us, again, Mineral Springs, Arkansas, where they built like 20 resorts over these vents. It's pretty crazy. Beautiful place. Excuse me. I need a stretch. Okay. They intended to operate it as a semi hotel and sanitarium. Now, the sanitarium thing I've kind of shown was very interesting, and that I've gone as far as to say that the radium emanations and were being used for everybody, and that whole towns were building their fountains on radium spring water. And the concept of Ponce de Leon and the chasing the fountain of youth. I think these fountains of youth existed all over. They were everywhere, and they were often the foundation or the center of a city or a population. And the sanitarium, old world. People, there's been a lot of videos. People have done a lot of videos on this, so I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. But it strongly correlates to radium, and that's what I think these were. That and they were always labeled as like the first kind of vacation destination. When vacation and holiday was kind of a new um, term, essentially, right? America being repopulated after some kind of event, and the idea that these sanitariums perhaps come from a previous age. It's very interesting. Correlates with a lot of the stuff we've been sharing here. Whether or not these buildings were part of that situation or the buildings were newer or older, I can't say for sure. There's definitely a lot of examples of sanitariums that seem far too advanced to be built in the 1840s, 1850s, and onward. But yeah, the ore bearing Arkansas Ozarks have been confined to the mineral belt and have invariably been broken into by miners, having no known outlet. The fact that they contain zinc ore is probably due to this reason, had they had an outlet, the ore would have passed off in solution, as it is soluble in water. Three very distinct openings have been discovered during the past 2 years in the mining district, one at the Red Cloud mine on Rush Creek and another at the Philadelphia mine on Clobber Creek in both Marion County, another at Madison mine in Boone County and near Zinc. Both of the openings in Marion County have been practically filled with ore, tallow, clay, and rock. In some places, this formation was soft. In other places, it had been solidly welded together by the water carrying lime and zinc in solution. The opening at the Madison is well defined and has been explored as far back in the mountain as a mile and a half, and at the end was not reached then. In this cavern, in many places, one has to crawl. The roof is so low. In other places, it opens out wide and forms chambers. Some places it is like a hillside, and one can look down 20 feet to the bottom of the other sidewall, which at this place is full of curiously wrought portals of several feet across that open into other passages. You can hear water always running, sometimes above you and sometimes below you. We're going to hop to the second page here. In the larger chambers near the roof, the water has cut away shelves, and on these are deposits of tallow clay, which has been cut into fantastic shapes and resembles old castles and battlements. The ore in this opening lays below the floor of the cave. Desultory mining has opened up some 85 feet of ore bearing strata, which was very rich, but the cave has never been fully explored. Many of the smaller caves have their silent histories. There is the old saltpeter cave in Marion County, where the Confederates mined and refined saltpeter to make gunpowder with during the Civil War. Many of the old kettles which were used in the refining process are scattered over this section. Today, among the farmers who use them to scald hogs in and for the family washing, the cylinder head of the old donkey engine with which they used to draw their dirt from the cage is buried open and up in the front yard of Wim Amer of Amos. Near the little town of Oakland, 20 miles north of here, a short time ago, a number of pieces of Indian artwork in the shape of carved sandstone were taken from the cove. Ed Ferris, manager of the Arkansas Missouri Telephone Company of this place, while exploring a cave on Buffalo River with his father in law, came upon a skeleton caught fast between two rocks and only record of a silent tragedy enacted years before. And in many instances where caves are handy to civilize, they are used as refrigerators in the summertime by their lucky owners as a storage rooms in the winter for fruits and vegetables. H.B. Brown, a merchant who lives at Cricket, had such a cave near his store. In the summer months, he was able to purchase eggs and keep them fresh for quite a period. And in the winter, he used it as a vegetable storeroom. North of Mountain Home is a cave on the farm of Will Taylor, where he and his neighbors keep their vegetables and fruits in the wintertime. Nothing freezes. The temperature is practically the same in winter and summer. The caves in the Ozarks present an interesting study to the geological student and to the man who likes to find thrills in unknown recesses of the bowels of the earth. Another long winded one. Um, the picture I'm trying to build here again is that, like most places along the Mississippi River, we're dealing with a complete subterranean world. I would say that Arkansas and Kentucky are covered, are literally standing on top of some of the largest cave systems in the world. Now, I don't want to cover this entire article here because it mostly exists in Missouri, but this can be kind of a bridge between states. Um, but it's an important one to talk about. To give you an example of what I'm saying, I'm just going to read the first little caption here, and then you can stay tuned to next week's episode, Missouri, as we go deeper into the subterranean worlds, the buried subterranean worlds. Arabian Night Wonders, a cave in the Ozark Mountains surpassing in extent that of Kentucky. In the deepest vastness of the mysterious Ozark Mountains, 18 miles southeast of Galena, Missouri, is perhaps the greatest and most wonderful natural formation in the world. The famous Mammoth Cave of Kentucky has long been looked upon as the greatest marvel of the kind in the known world, but its greatest depth is only 9 miles from the entrance. Hidden away in the Ozarks is a cavern which extends over 30 miles and has ramifications which, when fully explored, will undoubtedly, says a correspondent of the Philadelphia Press, show cavernous chambers and openings extending more than 300 miles. The existence of this cave has been known for about 10 years, and its position makes it so difficult of access that no exploration has ever been made which will tell of half the wonders to be seen in the underground palace. The word palace is used advisedly, for the interior of the cave is lined throughout with the purest white marble and variegated onyx. Stalactites and stalagmites adorn the walls and top and bottom of these magnificent rooms with fantastic forms and odd shapes, which give the whole an air of some olden palace. So, yeah, we'll cover more of that um, in Missouri episode. But you can see the correlation. As I stated before, the Ozarks extend far into Arkansas, and the cave systems in Arkansas are endless. They found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and many of them they never found the ends.